years ago, so 2010, help me with the math, so 1980, it was about the highest, about 5.3 per 1,000 in the population. Israel's rate,
what, 70, 60%?
there was probably about 55. That's just an estimate. I can talk more later about divorce statistics. It's a whole lecture I give, but it's a little bit confusing. But it was translate, people said about then 50 to 55% risk of divorce based on those statistics. This is what I found out about Israel, and the current divorce rate, I think this was 2008 or 9, is about 2.0 per 1,000. And it puts Israel kind of in the mean of the other countries in that economic group, which are mainly Western European countries. However, the Israeli divorce rate has doubled since 1970, and it looks like from the trends that it's going up. Also, the age of marriage is increasing, and they only had data on women, because maybe men lied about their age, I don't know. But right now, 2009, I think, that the average age of marriage for women was 28. So the question is, what do young Israelis do after they leave the army at, what, 23, 24-ish, something like that? And 21. They travel.
India, South America.
But what do they do with their romantic relationships then? So this is a big question. There's an increasing, this is a big question where marriage education comes in. There's a gap in Western countries, and it will follow in more Eastern countries, it's there in Japan, between when education or the military ends and marriage begins, if people do get married. So that's where cohabitation comes in. So it's just an interesting period, and a lot of education, I believe, about mate selection, which is one of the newest areas in marriage education, is very important. So you can play a guessing game here. This is from the state of Oklahoma, where we have done work for the last 10 years. They decided to invest $10 million into increasing the health of their marriages in Oklahoma because the divorce rate was so high, and they had a lot of extra money due to the excess of our welfare reform program. So they formed the Oklahoma Healthy Marriage Initiative, and they decided to use our PREP program. PREP, by the way, stands for the Prevention and Relationship Education Program. And as part of the beginning, we did a random survey. Has anyone ever been to Oklahoma?
Saw the movie.
You saw the movie. Okay, let's see. Ready? Oh! Now, Susan's, was it your mom or dad was born? So one of the pieces, what do you call it in Hebrew? We call it karma in Boulder, Colorado. But spiritual, religious significance was that there was this connection between Oklahoma. And I love Oklahoma. We have served over 270,000 individual and couples with some version of the PREP program over the last 7 years. But that just shows, by the way, that the interest in marriage education, by the way, men are much more interested in marriage education than therapy, for reasons I'll talk briefly about. Men actually like marriage education because, in part, we teach men and women how to talk without fighting. And those stonewalling, withdrawing men, they actually speak more at times when they feel safe. And that's one of the basic principles of research-based marriage education. We demand, if you will, that couples are safe when they talk, if they follow our rules, if they follow our guidebook, if they follow our manuals. So here we ask, what were the contributors to your divorce if you were divorced? And you can see if you think this would echo here in Israel, it might not. We try to do research in every country we start working in because obviously every country, every culture is very different. So the number bottom, and people were able to check as many as they wanted, religious differences. Domestic violence was next, 30%. Economic hardship, 39%. Little or no marriage preparation. It's kind of interesting it was that high, that people had that sense, because this is before we started the initiative. And most people had some kind of counseling beforehand because it's a very, very religious state. Apparently it didn't work. Married too young. Getting married very, very young, in the United States at least, is a major predictor of divorce. Oklahoma has the youngest age of marriage in the states. 18, 19, something like that. Very young. These last three now are important. Infidelity. Now, I could give a whole day lecture, as Claire and others, on infidelity, Susan Heitler too. Lots of different ways of defining infidelity these days with Facebook and so on and so forth. But in any event, it has to do with the biggest issue that will come up in two lines. Too much arguing, problems communicating, but fighting destructively. 60%, and the biggest one by far is lack of commitment. Lack of commitment, which is one of the reasons, by the way, that commitment is a major component of our PrEP program, our marriage education program. Each marriage education program has some similarities and some differences. And infidelity clearly is related to lack of commitment. Okay, now as Claire noted, everybody has their own perspective on what marriage education is and what it isn't. Susan has hers. But my overarching goals, and actually this is part of our government policy in terms of funding programs to help couples through marriage education, is to help couples who want to have a healthy relationship to have one. Again, because healthy relationships, healthy marriages positively affect children, infect in a positive way, probably not a bad word, and adults themselves. In a similar study, Claire mentioned a study where you have an argument, mothers yell at their kids. What's happening with the fathers? The fathers go to work and they have poor days at work. They don't work well. So there's no doubt the association between destructive conflict and negative outcomes. The very, 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 very good news is we can help virtually any couple, any situation, develop the tools, give them the tools to communicate well, to talk without fighting about any issue. Every single study, and there are scores and scores of studies, many using PrEP, many using other programs, about the power of teaching couples how to communicate well. We even have new studies now where we're just working with individuals, and the skills that we teach the individuals can spill over into positive communication between the partners at home, and positive parenting, and we can even see outcomes spreading to the children. Individual marriage education, positively influencing couples, positively influencing parenting, influencing children. Pretty dramatic spillover effect. And the investment in marriage education compared to, if you can, this is one study that if you can keep one child out of prison through the general cost of marriage education for 1,000 or 2,000 couples, that you'll save a lot of money. Just something to think about. So I noted that healthy marriage has benefits. I have a word picture. Am I blocking anybody's view, by the way? No? You can see through me? Okay. If I am, just yell. I'm in Israel, I'm sure you would. I grew up in New York. I could talk a lot about that. But being in Israel is like being in New York squared. So, again, this is a summary that people have a healthy marriage. Adults do better at work, earn more money, feel happier in life, and the list can go on. Now, in terms of the children, I'm not going to say very much about children during this talk, but children growing up in stable, happy, two-parent homes do better with friends, in schools, emotionally, and that list can go on. And there are very, very few long-term studies, but a good friend and colleague and pioneer showed that by enhancing marital and family quality, 20 years later, children were less likely to wind up in an institution that had to do with criminality. Powerful. Marriage education, and if you don't want to take notes on this, and by the way, I forgot to say at the beginning, again, I'm also, when I go to another country and have to speak in English, and people are not really that familiar with English, though I know some of you are, again, I'm just blessed by your willingness to listen to my English. And people have trouble understanding my English back in the United States, so I can only imagine what it's like here. So I'm glad to make these slides, or Susan, available to you in terms of these definitions. But marriage education teaches skills and principles associated with a safe and healthy relationship, and it is based on research as much as possible. Programs are refined as new research comes out. Marriage education is not couples therapy. It's not couples therapy, though some therapists get trained in marriage education and incorporate some of the principles. Some couples therapists get trained in PrEP and offer PrEP as a program. And there are some areas of blurriness. And I think I sent you a chapter on some of the areas of blurriness. But it's very important because the leaders are not therapists. And this is critical, that the audience who will participate, hopefully here in Israel, needs to know this is not therapy. And this is critically important to men. Okay? Men are much less likely to want to go to couples therapy than to marriage education once they know what marriage education is. And most people don't. So a big task is educating people about marriage education. Participants are explicitly told that they will not need to say anything personal in the class or workshop. Personal disclosure will come talking to their partner. Okay. Very, very important. And typically, marital education is delivered to groups of couples. Could be really small groups, it could be larger groups. And interestingly, Claire made such an interesting point that she said therapy is not, how many therapists, work at night? I work through 7 o'clock, and I'm probably one of the latest. I do a small practice. Marriage education is usually delivered in settings that are accessible to couples. Many programs are able to offer childcare, which is one of the major barriers to people not coming. And they're often offered at night and on weekends. Marcy and I are involved in a big project in Denver, and that's the only time we offer the program at nights and weekends. So the program is much more accessible in general. And they're offered, the leader, as I'll mention in a moment, is often a community member that the people know and trust. A clergy, a teacher, and that enhances safety and accessibility. So Marcy likes to say that we serve all stages and ages in marriage education. And just a few of the developmental periods that we serve, from planning marriage, transition to parenthood, empty nest. Do you have a term, empty nest, here? Do your kids ever leave home? In the United States, there's no empty nesting. It's chronic nesting, full nesting. That's why I'm glad my son is in Israel. If he wasn't in Israel, he'd be living with us. No, he's a great young man, and hopefully he's very interested in getting involved in some way, shape, and form. In the United States, the giant issue is blending families, or step families. Although more and more step families here in Israel. Much higher risk of divorce for blending. I call them blending families versus step families, just because the process is ongoing. You're not done with it. And then, big area of interest in the United States, aging couples. Aging couples. They say 60 is the new 40. That means 80 is the new 60. And we have more and more as the baby boomers get older. So aging couples, there's going to be a lot of money for aging couples. And we're trying to get some. Leaders follow a manual, very explicit. So that's why leaders are not therapists often. The leaders need to be able to follow the manual. We can use graduate students. We can use mothers, fathers. Anyone can be trained if they're interested and good with people and willing to follow the manual in marriage education. So not only can we serve all ages and stages, that people of all ages and stages can be trained as leaders. Okay? And they also have to be trained as coaches, because part of the skill training is to have a coach for at least every 2 couples. Now, we can expand that or weaken it. You get a kind of a dose-response remedy at that point in time. And here we have a word about coaches. So the coach is just like a football coach or a basketball coach. Trains the couples to use the skills. Lots of positive reinforcement. Great job. And people learn better. I think I'm probably speaking to the converted